Welcome to Cwic Show today. Today is December 23rd, 2025, moving very quickly to Christmas Day this year. Today we're going to be covering you've heard me use the term the religion of academia. We're going to go over why that religion has developed and fomented so much over the last almost 100 years. And a new study that came out from the Buckley Institute, written up in the New York Post and other publications about Yale University, and we'll look at some other demographics, some other statistics from other universities, and show you what is happening in the world of higher education in the United States. We're also going to cover a program in South Korea. South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world, and something that seems to be helping to tick things up a little bit. I want to talk about that. It's about economics, and it has had a positive impact, so we need to take a look at that. This episode is brought to you by Cardio Miracle. Cardio Miracle is a supplement that I take every single day, 3 times a day, that has changed my labs. It has changed the way I feel just so much. It has been a big part of me and my health. I had major health problems over the last several years. That was both something that held me back quite a bit and something that kept me in the hospital for quite a bit. And this is a product that has changed my labs, blood pressure, kidneys, gout, a number of different things that are measurable. And so if you want to find out more about my story with Cardio Miracle, you can go to cwicmedia.com, scroll down to the video toward the bottom of the screen, and you can hear my story a little bit more and what I think of Cardio Miracle, why I use it so much. Here we go. All right. A new study has come out on Yale University from the Buckley Institute. Right? They have a report that had some findings that are remarkable in the sense that they need to be remarked on, and it is disturbing to see what has unfolded in the universities over the last number of years, the last number of decades especially. Here is what we have as the headline to the New York Post article. It says nearly 30 Yale undergraduate departments have no Republican faculty, the Buckley Institute report finds. Now think about that for a minute. It's 27 actually is the actual number. 27 departments at Yale University do not have a single person or faculty member that has identified as being a Republican. That is incredible, absolutely incredible. And the numbers at these elite universities that we have today that are basically the motor behind academia throughout the entire United States, where we find our experts at, are almost identical in these numbers. And we've seen this tick up higher and higher over the years in terms of the number of those that identify on the left or identify as Democrats. Now, this is not being anti-left. This is being anti-institutional. And the institutions that have been absolutely captured, especially academia, by an unchecked side of the political spectrum. So let's take a look a little bit deeper into what the report finds here in this article. A recent report, it says, from the Buckley Institute found that there are no Republican faculty members across 27 departments at Yale University. For the 3rd year in a row, our research has highlighted the significant political and ideological imbalance among Yale's faculty. Lauren Noble, founder and executive director of the Buckley Institute, said in a statement. Let me go on a little further here. Yale has committed repeatedly over decades to fostering an environment conducive to open debate. What debate? Open debate and discussion, but has all but excluded diversity of opinion through its hiring process. Well, this is partially a normal thing. In other words, when you have people that get put into department heads and deans of colleges, university presidents, etc., you end up coming out of a certain network. And so those people that you know that are within your realm of influence and of friendship and of colleagues are of the same political persuasion oftentimes. But there is definitely a turn here, or not a turn, but it's a spiral, right? The more you move, let's say you are at a 70-30 split at one point, which is only a few decades ago. And so you've got a 70-30 split where it's 70% on the left and 30% on the right. And so what's going to start to happen there? Well, you're outnumbered already by more than 2-1 on one side versus the other. And so that's going to be the dominant voice. It's going to attract people for that agree with that dominant voice. It's going to repel those that do not agree with that voice. Some people might feel ostracized. They feel like they want to leave and get out of the situation. I've seen this very closely happen to a couple of departments at BYU Provo and BYU Hawaii, and a little bit at BYU Idaho. So this is a normal thing to happen in academia. It's a normal thing to happen anywhere, in any institution, any organization. As you start getting a monolith of ideology, political ideology, that starts to take over. And of course, what's the problem with that? Well, imagine you're in a department, an English department, and you're starting to look at, you start really infusing postmodern literary criticism into the text that you're reading. Well, if you don't have a check on that, it's going to run amok. It's going to go crazy, bananas, berserko on the literary criticism, because there's no other side to push back on what you're teaching to young minds that are easily formed at this point, malleable, as they've just come out of the nest, so to speak, from their homes. And you've got one point of view that just goes off the rails. And it's always going to go off the rails, and the same thing would happen the other way. If you had 90, 95%, 98, 99%, 100% of those that identified on the right or as Republican, you're going to get a very narrow point of view. And it's going to work the same way. But that's not the way it is in the elite universities in the United States. It's the exact opposite, right? It's all on the left right now. And this is something that also goes against the trust that people have in higher institutions. And how do you stop it? Who inside of a university, a president, a dean, a department head, who's going to stand up against their colleagues and say, I think we're too far to the left? Who's going to do that? It would be so rare for any of that to ever happen. The only thing that works with something like this is financial pressure in some way. That's the only way it's going to change. And it's interesting because I hear from certain people, well, wokeness is dead, right? It's the left has lost it, because you look at Trump and you look at all the changes that are happening in government and the policies, procedures that are going into place, all of the executive orders that are being signed. It's like, look, you don't understand. Those are all temporary. All of those things are temporary. The institutions are fully taken over right now by the left, and especially academia. What does that mean for the future? What does that mean for how we're educating our kids? What does that mean for family going forward, and how an unchecked leftism in universities is indoctrinating our children in the universities? And yes, even in a number of conservative universities, and even at BYU for sure. Here's what the article says. In addition here, it says, with such dramatic ideological chasm, a dramatic ideological chasm between the Yale campus and the country, it is not hard to see why trust for higher education is low. That is so true, so true. The Buckley Institute's report looked at Yale's undergraduate departments as well as its School of Management and Law School. It found that nearly 83% of faculty are registered Democrats or primarily support Democratic candidates. So this is slowly ticking up. We saw it elite. It's a little above where it was just a few years ago, where it was about an 80-20 split among the entire faculty at universities. So, and you say, well, that's not so bad. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible because you're only going to have a few departments where this number is possibly, which it won't, but possibly have anything you could even say is a significant number of those that lean to the right, which would be like in engineering and different things like that you would think, right? So it's in other departments, as it says, 27 departments have zero registered Republicans in their departments. I mean, you can imagine where those are. They're probably in the humanities. I mean, just stop and think about the hiring process for this, how this has worked, right? Zero. So no one cares about diversity of opinion here. What they care about are people that are into DEI. They're worried about people that are going to toe the line on diversity, equity, inclusion, as long as it does not include diversity of thought. That's a no-no in these elite universities. Moving on here, more than 15% identify as independent and fewer than 3% are Republicans, according to the report. All right, so let's back up and look at this. So you have here actually, right, those that are actually registered Republicans at Yale University. This is the going across the law school, the School of Management, and undergraduate. 3%. 3% that are registered as Republicans because the other 15% are independent. What kind of an education is that? Because no matter what you're studying, no matter what a student is studying, if you are ideologically possessed, as this has to be, and it would be on the right if it was the same numbers on the right, everything that you're doing, everything you're looking at is going to be looked through a specific lens of leftism. And yes, leftism, I'm not just talking about liberal. There might be a few liberal professors here. But again, when you have this number of ideologues, you're going to have it run amok. It's going to go nuts because there's nobody checking it. What's interesting is that in response, Yale says this, that it is fostering that. What's interesting is that Yale says this in response to the report. It says that Yale is dedicated to fostering, quote, fostering intellectual diversity at Yale. Okay, intellectual diversity. What does that mean? Where is the intellectual diversity here, right? And that they are dedicated to attracting students across the political spectrum, bolstering free speech at Yale and beyond, whatever. No, they're not. That's a nice thing to say, but that is not the case. It says the university is, however, deeply committed to fostering open debate, preserving freedom of expression, and creating an environment in which a wide range of ideas can be expressed and heard civilly. Is that what we see at the universities? Is that what we see here with the Free Palestine movement? Is this tolerance for different diversity of thought on campus? This is, when you look at the students that are doing this, these are 18 to 22-year-olds primarily, not everyone. Right? But you've got basically 18 to 22-year-olds. Where are they getting this to go out and do this? Yes, there's social media. Yes, there's organizations that are a part of. But these are the professors and others that are rounding these individuals up and pushing this and supporting it. You saw the same thing at BYU with its protest, its pride protest a few years back. It was the professors and faculty members and administration certain members of faculty and administration that were supporting this. And this is the same thing that you get here on these universities, on the campuses of these universities. Finally, it says, together, talking about their initiatives, right? These efforts reflect Yale's long-standing dedication to academic freedom, free expression, yeah, we see that all the time, and constructive dialogue across differences. There is no across differences. None. Finally, I want to look at some other elite universities to give us a broader view of what is going on here. And maybe you're unaware of this. I mean, I'm sure you feel that this leans left. It doesn't lean to the left. That this is leaning to the left would not be a problem. I would probably enjoy going to a university, honestly, personally, that leaned a little bit left. That would not be a problem for me. Not that I would choose it, but if I was in one, I don't think I would have a problem with that. That's not what we're seeing. Okay, so this is a little bit difficult to see here maybe, but look at the proportion of registered Democrats versus Republicans among faculty at elite U.S. universities. This is from Langbert, M. and Stevens from 2022. Harvard, 99% among faculty are registered Democrats. Princeton, 98%. Yale, 97%. We saw that, right? Now, this is going to be, it excludes the independents and non-registered individuals. So Yale is 97%. Remember, there were only 3% registered Republicans there. Berkeley, 97% Democrat. Columbia, 96%. Brown, 96%. Johns Hopkins, 95%. Duke, 95%. Cornell, 95%. Caltech, 93%. Stanford, 91%. Whew, we're getting pretty conservative here. Dartmouth, 91%. Penn, 90%. And UCLA, below 90% at 89%. Registered Democrats or independents on this. So this is a obviously something that has developed throughout academia. Now understand something here. When we talk about the religion of academia, this spreads everywhere because the leading universities, right? The leading universities, the elite universities where everyone's trying to get into if you've got a career path toward academia. And everyone's trying to hire these individuals that are coming out of these institutions, out of these universities. These are the experts. These are the experts that we have in the United States that are coming out of this type of a teaching right now. Is it no wonder that we have such a cultural push to the left consistently when our universities have this type of a makeup, our elite universities have this type of makeup in them. And as an example, I mean, when you say, there has been a push, this has changed over the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years maybe. There's been a push at BYU, for example, to be the Harvard of the West. I think it was Cecil Samuelson that came out with that as the president originally. But look what that means. Again, if I go back to Harvard right now, 99% non-registered Republicans at Harvard. So is that what you want to be, is the Harvard of the West? And if you're hiring out of Harvard to bring better faculty, so to speak, into BYU, what comes along with that? Yes, these are rigorous programs, so you've got a certain level of academia that's there, but what comes along with that typically? All of the baggage around that comes from the ideologies that they have been immersed in for, however long they've been at Harvard, whether it's their undergrad or master's, if they're getting their PhD there, and now, now they're at BYU. And this is exactly what we've seen. You've got some radical professors that are at BYU. And everything else gets pushed out. I can't tell you how many times I have talked to professors at departments that are lean so far left, especially at the department head level, and those that are around their closest associates, especially in the humanities, but other places too, where you feel like everything's going crazy here. I have no voice. And of course, they feel like they can't speak up, because they have a career path and they rely on those individuals to give them good marks and to give them opportunities. And they've got to do with those department heads, basically, right? What they say. And that's where I started really talking about the spiral of silence, is actually because of BYU and these professors that would not say a word. They wouldn't say anything about what was being taught to the students. Because it was they had all these, and the truth is at BYU, these are the minority, by far the minority of voices that are radical at BYU, but people are afraid to say something against them. But if you walk through the halls of the humanities, I mean, you're going to see pride flags everywhere. You're going to see anti-right type of propaganda. You're going to see an awful lot of strange things. And you're going to say to yourself, this is BYU? You won't see many family proclamations up. Let's just put it that way. I think there was one that I saw one time that was up in the halls of the faculty of humanities. But this is what you bring in, and at anywhere. And then what starts to happen is, again, you have a certain ideology there, and in the hiring of bringing in new individuals, if you don't fit that ideology, you don't fit in our group. This is not what we're trying to accomplish here, which is typically in those organizations when they are radical like that, it is, we're going to undo the teaching of the parents for 18 years and show them what's real at this point, right? And that is something that happens. At BYU Hawaii, especially, I mean, you have had, early retirement. You have had people basically forced out that if you are conservative, if you are a male, if you are white, massive changes there. You've got a lot of professors there don't want to stay. They don't want to stay because of the environment that is created there among the faculty and those that are running it. And so you start getting a change, right? You start getting a change in who they attract, who they're going to hire, what voices are going to be listened to. And these are microcosms of what happens, right? But I'm just bringing it up because it's a little closer to the church. So out of all of this, we get the religion of academia that starts to flourish, which is basically cultural Marxism. And yes, it's taught even at Brigham Young University. Trust me, I've got the videos, I've got the audios. It happens there. And the thing is what do you do? BYU has made a number of changes over the last few years in their hiring practices and their interview processes each year that are basically tying things closer to the family proclamation and feeling, how do you look at the family proclamation? But you could say whatever you want in those interviews. But at least you're making a statement as to what we're looking for and what we want here, right? What do you do in these other universities? How do you change this? Who's going to actually change this? There are some signs of some of these things changing. But, at Yale University, last year, they hired their 24th president, who is Maury McInnes. She was the president of Stony Brook University. She has secured at Stony Brook one of the largest. She secured at Stony Brook a $700 million bid to lead the New York Climate Exchange campus on Governor's Island. Okay, so where does she lean? As we look at the scam, honestly, that higher education has become, the incredible cost for an education, the bloating of administrative positions in these universities. One university I saw has 2 students for every administrative hire. 2 students for every administrative hire. And anywhere where that much money is coming in from the government, where you get all these loans coming in, is going to have corruption. So the religion of academia comes out of all of this. It foments because of the money that is involved here. They can hire so many people. They hire people on the left, on the far left, and there's no check in this system. And so this religion, basically, it is a religion, just grows and grows and grows because there's no check to it. And it dominates our universities. And honestly, to some degree, no pun intended, we are educating our kids and indoctrinating them as some parents are mortgaging their homes or spending their retirement savings to educate their kids at a bloated cost. Anyway, real problem. Lastly, I want to cover what South Korea is doing on the fertility rate. South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world. This is a very dangerous thing. I know I talk about this a lot, but it is crucial that we understand how important this is. With South Korea's birth rate has finally increased from where it is. When we say increase, I forget what the number is right now, but it's down maybe about 1.2-ish. South Korea's birth rate has finally increased after the government started paying $29,000 in cash to couples who date and marry. Right? So they're giving financial incentives here. Now, I don't know if this is the right way to do this. It's something, but it has obviously made a shift from one year to the next in their fertility rate. It actually went up a little bit. It ticked up slightly. And it's one way to do this, right? I mean, I was just listening to Louise Perry, who was talking about, look, we found a new study that is shown. I was just listening to Louise Perry. I was just listening to Louise Perry on a podcast. She says something that is not quite correct. I followed Louise for a very long time, a number of years since she wrote her early books on transgenderism. I don't want to say that. I've followed Louise I was listening to Louise Perry on a podcast here that I've got pulled up here on X. I was listening to Louise Perry on a podcast. Louise Perry I've followed for a number of years. She's talking about the fertility rate, the birth rate, right? She says it's not contraception. In other words, these are not the problems. It's not contraception, feminism, or housing. It's just people marrying too late. The average first marriage now over 30, right? We've now moved in the U.S. where the average first marriage is over 30 years old. During the baby boom generation, when they were having kids, the average age for marriage was 22 years old. So remember, you're looking at a woman's biological clock, and you're moving it from 22 to 28 typically, because yes, there are a lot of women that have kids out of wedlock, but the driving force behind all of this is families, it's marriage. And so you go from 22 to 30, 8 years. You're cutting in half or at least a third the time that women would have to have children or want to have children at that point, right? So she says, once married, most have kids. Childless by choice are rare but loud. Okay, this is true. However, right, she says here, late marriage equals no time for 2 to 3 kids in fertile window. That's not true. You could easily have 3 kids in your 30s, right? Simple coordination problem, holding back families. Like, it does make a difference. There's no question it would make a difference. But the focus is not on, it's just this is the only simple problem, is that people are getting married too late. You have to come back and say to yourself, why are people getting married later? You have to look at those underlying issues here. Take a look at what
the only thing that is wrong with fertility rates in the West is people getting married late. Lyman's take, and I think it's actually a really interesting one, he thinks that's the only problem, because actually once people are married, they tend to have kids. He says that the number of people who are married and are deliberately not having children, like the dinks, they're quite culturally prominent, but they're actually rare. The average age of first marriage now is over 30, definitely. And the average age of marriage in general is quite old, because people who get married multiple times account for a disproportionate number of...
Okay, so here's the problem, right? Again, what she's saying here, she's not giving the real reasons for not having kids, because the real reasons for not having kids is the same reasons for not getting married earlier. And those reasons are economic. Those reasons are feminism. Those reasons are a hostility that is growing between young men and young women, because our culture is pushing it. Toxic masculinity and toxic femininity, we can call it. And so these are the underlying issues. I don't think she has any clue what she's saying here whatsoever. Why are people getting married after 30 years old now, on average? as compared to 22 during the baby boomer generation. What is the difference between the two? One, we're boomers. In other words, lots of kids, baby boomers, and now we're into, from the millennials down to Gen Z, basically, we are looking at people waiting a longer time to get married. It is dating, the issues that are going on in dating. It is economics. It is feminism for sure. For sure, it is feminism. And it is animosity. It is distractions. It is gaming for boys, porn for boys and men, young men, right? It's a number of these different things that we're looking at culturally that have shifted and been inserted into our culture and into our practice for the younger generation right now. And we can see with the South Korean program, even though a lot of these programs have failed as far as like they've gone through and try, especially in the Scandinavian countries where they've tried to give more incentives, tax breaks, and policy changes that would help financially for those that would get married and have kids. It takes all the way to the point of, let me give you $29,000. Hey, maybe we'll get married and have kids, and we'll have this $29,000 to help us start off. Not the best policy in the world. I think there's actually a cultural shift that needs to happen, but we know how difficult that is. It's the same type of thing with the universities. How do you shift a culture that is so entrenched and trending the wrong way? Thanks for listening.